I'm going to start the recording now. And if you're just joining us, please just put in the chat your name and where you're calling in from, and tell us if you are a TideRiser member already, or if you are new to our community. So we also have a number of TideRisers coaches on the call. If you all could please give a wave, and also just change your name if you haven't already to say TideRisers Coach, just so that people can identify you. These are people who you can go to ask any and all questions of about the program, about community building, about intention setting, or about just about anything else related to TideRisers. I will let you know we have 3 special guests who we'll be talking to today: Lindsay, Barbee, Maëlle Fonteneau, and Ayanna Smith. Ayanna has had a family emergency, and she is very valiantly in an airport right now, mask on this call. And I just wanted to call out Ayanna for her spectacular loyalty to us and attempts to really be engaged in this conversation, even though she's got a lot going on. So thank you, Ayanna. And just to let you all know, if she does have
Thank you. And I'm I'm going to leave my camera off. Yeah.
That is fine. We totally understand. TideRiser is a place where you come and you show up just as you are. So you are always welcome to be with us in whatever state of travel, mayhem you might be in. So yeah, let's get started. I am going to just share my screen. All right, can you all see that? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can? Good, thank you very much. So we're here to talk about building community to advance your intentions. I'm just going to walk through a little roadmap. I like to just kind of show you what you're going to be in for the next hour. First, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my personal journey with community building and how it led me to create TideRisers. I'm going to talk a little bit about community building must-haves, kind of foundational qualities that you need for a strong, happy, resilient community. We're going to talk about the real pillars of the TideRisers community and how we build our community. We're going to have a panel discussion with Lindsay, Maëlle, and Ayanna. And then we're going to put you into breakout rooms so you can get to know these fabulous women more. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So I guess I'll just get started by talking a little bit about myself, which some of you who know me well know that I don't always do that very sort of willingly, but I'll share that I have, I think, fairly recently come to realize that I think I've been really a student of community my whole life. I've been trying to figure out sort of what makes community and what makes a really strong, resilient community. I think a lot of it comes down to really having a sense of belonging. And so I've been really fascinated by how you create that belonging and what it means to belong and how powerful it is to belong to a community. I think I come at this from a place where I never quite felt like I had a place of belonging myself growing up. And I think, like many people who aren't born into a particular talent or characteristic, I had to learn it, and that makes me able to teach it in a way. So I love talking about community, but I grew up in Washington, D.C. I know there are a bunch of D.C. people here. I grew up in a predominantly Black community and was sort of constantly throughout my childhood, white girl, the white girl, and actually became a dancer at a young age. I became a tap dancer and joined a company and sort of did semi-professional dancing for a long time. And again, was sort of like always the white girl in that environment, and especially I think in an art form that's very sort of true and of the Black community, especially in the DC area. That was always a really interesting dynamic and a profound learning experience, and really kind of a gift in my life. I also grew up Quaker, which is, a little bit unusual in that there are not that many of us around. My parents literally went shopping for religion when I was born because they were eager to sort of, I think, move away from their religious backgrounds, but wanted to find a new one. And they happened upon Quakerism. And again, major gift in my life, still a very huge part of my life. And Quakerism has a very interesting way of addressing community and building community. But again, I always felt like I was part of that community, but also felt a little bit outside of it because my family came from a very different sort of cultural background in many ways. So then I moved to New York City to go to NYU, which I loved, loved, loved. I consider my home to be New York City. I was there for 25 years, but of course I'm not like a New Yorker. And then I moved to London 2.5 years ago, and I'm certainly not a Brit. So I've had this like sense of and experience of being sort of other, which I think has been a real amazing learning experience and has given me a lot of time to look at community building and the concept of belonging. So, you know, when anybody says the word community, it can mean something different to everybody. So I'd love it if you all would jump back into the chat and just let us know in a couple of words or sentences what the concept of community means to you. So what does community mean? When you hear that word, what pops into your mind? I see support, connection, belonging, group of people I trust, the village. I love the village concept, support and collaboration, togetherness. Yeah, thank you. Keep going, keep them coming. So when I started Tide Risers about, well, 5 years ago, we launched, really came out of a place where I was looking for things that I just couldn't really find. I was feeling frustrated by what I felt was a lack of kind of good coaching and mentoring options for me with all the sort of like particular place I was in my life and the needs that I had and the decisions I was trying to make about my career and my life and my family. I also felt frustrated by the networking opportunities that were presented to me. I just didn't feel like they were really true moments to build relationship. I also felt that whenever I got together with the brilliant women in my life, we only had time to talk about work and our families. And those are the really important things, and that's great, but we never really had time and space for different conversations about different subjects or really get to delve into just matters that didn't have to do with those kind of much more everyday, you know, essential conversations. So at the same time, you know, I'm a coach, and my coaching clients were, especially the women, often coming to me with very similar issues, but feeling isolated within those issues, like they weren't happening to anybody else. So I started this journey to build Tide Risers, and we've all, you know, learned so much along the way, including how to build and nurture community. And I think this past year in particular has been really a real learning experience for all of us. How do you build and maintain healthy, resilient communities when we're living through a global pandemic? And we can't rely on some of the more conventional in-person community building techniques that we all have relied on for so long. So, and what we found is that, you know, while we're very proud of the Tide Risers curriculum and our programming and the framework we've developed, and those play a really important role in all of our members being able to advance themselves and move forward. But I think the real magic of Tide Risers is our community. And it comes down to the fact that we all share this common sense of purpose, that we're all here to help one another advance and thrive. And we have the shared experience of our curriculum. And we're able to build deep and meaningful relationships, the type where, you know, somebody will remember your name when an opportunity passes their way that might be good for you. You know, Tide Risers is a place where when you need help with something, you just raise your hand and somebody's going to be there to assist you. I don't know if Callan's on the call, but she dropped a note in our Slack channel the other day that she was doing a new presentation or giving a new talk, and she just needed some people to practice it with. And I think it was a kind of last minute thing, but she was able to gather 4 Tide Risers together to hop on a Zoom and give her that opportunity to practice and give her feedback. And I think that's the type of thing that we see happening so often that I think is really meaningful and would only happen in a community that's really built on trust. We've also just seen so many jobs and friendships and business partnerships develop over the years. And I think that's really due to our special sauce of community as well. So when it comes to building community, and let me just share my screen again so I can hop back into this. The concepts are rather simple, but the implementation can also, so with so many things, it's the implementation that's actually quite complicated. Can you all see my slides again? Thank you, great. Let me go to the next one. So these are some of the must-haves that we've discovered about building healthy and deliberate communities. This is kind of the foundational stuff that you need. A sense of shared purpose. Rituals. I think this is something that's so important to build into any kind of community. And a lot of times they happen naturally. But this is, I think the ritual is what helps you say, you know, this is what we do together. Once you get to a point in a community where you can say, this is what we do. Like if it's, you know, taking a moment to have a visualization at the beginning of every session like we do, or if it's taking your ski trip with your girlfriends every February, whatever it is, like having that ritual is a really essential element. Trust is a really important one. And we talk a lot about trust and confidentiality, but we talk a lot about vulnerability as well in Tide Risers, and really being able to get to a point where you can be vulnerable and trust that your community will support you. Very importantly, you know, leaders who model the behaviors that you want to get out of the community is an essential piece. And then shared values. And this is what we're going to talk about more today. These are just the foundational pillars of community building. And there needs to be a conscious commitment to living and breathing them every day. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Tide Risers values, which we refer to as our leadership principles, because these are really the pillars of the Tide Risers community. I'm going to talk a little bit about them, and then I promise I'm going to stop talking at you and bring in some of our panelists, because I'd love to have them share their experiences with you. The 4 pillars of community building for Tide Risers are really these principles of abundance, ownership, authenticity, and courage. Abundance, something that we talk about a lot. When we share resources, when we share information, achievements, networks, we create more for everyone. And this is one that I really lean on heavily myself, because we, as a leadership team of Tide Risers, we have this principle of sharing abundantly. We all bring different experience and expertise, different mechanisms for helping women get unstuck and move forward, and we share them liberally. And because we do that, we have this incredible access to all of these different learnings and modalities and teachings and resources. And that has been just the most tremendous thing for me as a learning experience, but I think for our entire community, to have that shared resource and that abundant intention of making sure that we are always sharing and open to sharing. That's been really important for us. So that's the first. Ownership is, I think, for a lot of us, a very challenging one. This is about owning the role that you play in the community and being responsible for the impact that you have. And while we're all here to work together to advance and move out of whatever sticking point we're at and help one another do that, we all also have to commit to taking ownership of our experience and making the most out of it, because this is a place where you get out of it as much as you put in. Authenticity is something that gets talked about a lot these days. The way we talk about authenticity is really about nurturing and revealing your own perspective, even when you're embedded in a culture of a larger organization. And we get to this in a lot of ways in Tide Risers. I think key to it is really moving to a place where we can start uncovering some of the hidden assumptions that we all make about how we're supposed to be running our lives, how we're supposed to be living our lives, how we're supposed to be doing work, how we're supposed to be doing family. So understanding what those assumptions are that we've just always lived with, finding them, and then really like looking at how we measure success and analyzing whether or not the way we're defining success for ourselves, if those really line up with our values or not. So there's a process to go through to get to a place where you can feel like you are being your authentic self within a community. And then courage is the final one. For us, when we talk about courage, we're really talking about having that internal strength to speak your mind and live your truth and engage in conversations that can be uncomfortable. But courage isn't just about speaking and telling, it's also about listening, deep listening and active listening. And we find that courage is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And we look for opportunities within Tide Risers to do that. So I'm going to stop sharing now, but what I'm going to do is ask for some of our panelists to share a little bit about their experience. Is Maëlle? Oh, hi, Maëlle.
Hi there.
Hey, I'm going to pick on you first.
No problem.
So what I'd love for you and then Lindsay and Ayanna to do for us is to tell us which of these 4 leadership principles you really kind of anchored on during your Tide Risers journey. Like which of them helped you build community and help you advance professionally and personally? And if you could just tell us a little bit about that and about just your journey so far, that would be great. Also start with like who you are and the role you play in Tide Risers.
Awesome. So it's so great to be here with you all. My name is Maëlle, and I am a coach this year with Tide Risers. Last year, I led the New Jersey cohort, and I actually joined Tide Risers as a member in New York back in 2019. And the value that the leadership principle that stood out to me when I was doing my reflections for today is really courage. And the reason being, I was in a job in 2019 that was fine, like it was comfortable. I had young children at home. I knew the team, they knew me, I had credibility. It was hard work, so I was challenged, but it wasn't really what I knew I wanted to do. And I had not at all prioritized my own development when I was a new parent. It was like, I have limited time in the day, get the work done, and when I'm not working, be with the kids. And I learned about Tide Risers, and without even really learning much about it, I was like, I need this. I need space. I need community. I need to really just invest in myself, because what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis does not actually feel like I'm living the life that I want to be living. And so I joined Tide Risers, and what the courage really was that I left my job through the Tide Risers experience and launched into my own consulting practice. I work as a coach. I'm in the HR space. And what to me Tide Risers enabled me to do was actually just pause and stop and reflect. Like, as silly as that sounds, it's like I was just kind of maintaining the status quo on a day-to-day basis and not creating space to really align, like, what were my personal values? What did I want to do that would really take the time for me to be investing in myself professionally, that warranted the crazy work hours, that warranted these leadership roles that I was taking on? And so it was very hard, and it took kind of like many months, even through my Tide Risers experience as a facilitator, to process that transition and kind of find my new identity as a coach and as an entrepreneur. And so I'm now in this new journey of mine, and it was really tapping into taking that hard step and being, though, supported and embraced by phenomenal women, so many of whom have even more courage than I do and have grown their businesses in ways that I now have a network and a set of supports that I can tap into with every step of the way that I'm taking professionally. So that's a little bit about my story. I don't know, Lara, if that's good in terms of timing, but I'm happy to begin in the breakout group with all of you.
Yeah, we're gonna, in a few minutes, we're gonna do breakout rooms, and those of you who would like to get to know Maëlle and her story a little bit more and talk about courage, you can feel free to follow her into her room. But thanks for sharing that, Maëlle. I have really watched your journey with admiration. I'm so thrilled to have you be one of our coaches. Ayanna, are you in a place right now where you can speak?
I am. I kicked everybody out of the car. So I'm here. So thanks for having me, everyone. I think about Tide Risers and my experience with Tide Risers a lot. When I started Tide Risers, I was invited by our cohort leader and Danielle Toussaint, and I had no idea what it was, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I immediately thought that it was like group therapy for professional women. I don't know, that's the best way I describe it. It was definitely a sisterhood, and it's a sisterhood that's not like a sorority, but just kind of like this type of community and support that most of us need at this stage in our lives. A lot of the women in my cohort were entrepreneurs, they were mothers, they were wives, and they were in leadership positions in their professions. And so all of us kind of were in this space where we needed one another, even if it was just for being away from home for the time that we were in our meetings, just to have some quiet time with like-minded women. The leadership, um, the let's say courage and authenticity are the values, leadership values that stood out the most for me, and also just kind of spoke to where I was at that particular phase in my life, which is really kind of the same place I am right now. Authenticity, I would say, because just that always speaks to me, and it speaks to me because people describe me in that manner. I'm always the person who's unfiltered, who's brutally honest, and because of that, I'm able to connect with people, I feel like, in a way that other people are not always able to connect. And so but in Tie Risers, I was able to be my authentic self even more. And so I was able to build stronger connections with the women in my cohort because of the ability to just, be allowed to be who I am, unapologetically. And so I think that definitely our cohort, just in general, was a group of women who are authentic in their own ways. And we have one of the here today. I think Aaron's here. I think I saw Aaron. But definitely our cohort was a group of women who are authentic and allowed one another to be authentic. But also I would say courage spoke to me. That was the value that also spoke to me. And I consider myself a courageous person, but I'm an entrepreneur, but then I also found myself in a place where I felt like my entrepreneurial my enterprises did not put me in a place financially where I could save for my children's college. I mean, just getting by is one thing, but when you're a mom, a middle-aged mom, I felt like this is something I should have done when I was 20. I'm finding myself in a place where I don't have, steady income, chasing entrepreneurship, and I didn't have the stability that I felt like I needed. And so the courage that I need, and so I was considering at the time, working full time and pursuing my entrepreneurial journey. And it just felt to me like a failure. And so I really needed that sisterhood at that time to build the courage to say, this is normal. This is where you are right now at this phase in your life. You can't compare where you are in this journey to anyone else's journey. And having to face the reality that I was in, which is that I do need to work full time. I do need steady income, and I can do this and also pursue my entrepreneurial journey at the same time. And it just really took a lot of courage for me to be in that space and to accept that reality. And that sisterhood, and uh, the path that we were on together really helped me get through that particular phase where I felt like I needed courage. And so that value really spoke to me at that particular time. Courage and authenticity. And just going back to authenticity, even though I do, quite often most people, describe me as authentic, and that's the one thing that stands out about me to most people. It really, facing the fact that I was not where I wanted to be as an entrepreneur financially, I can't say I ever pretended that I was, and I wasn't, but it also just is not something that I was going around like with a billboard sharing with people. And so having the courage to be even more authentic in the failures, or just accepting that I wasn't quite where I wanted to be, they kind of went hand in hand during my time in Tide Risers. And I feel like I probably have gone past my time, but those were the values that really stuck with me, and that I was able to work through during my time with Tide Risers. And it was phenomenal.
I appreciate that. It's so interesting that you called out authenticity and courage, because I think those two really do go hand in hand. It takes a lot of courage to be authentic, and even to figure out what it means to be authentic, and how, and if it's safe and even possible in a variety of different environments to be your authentic self. So I appreciate that you brought both of those forward and paired them. And Ayanna, just so that you know, we're going to pair you for the breakout sessions with another Tide Risers coach. So if you do have to jump off, don't worry, we'll have somebody to fill in as backup. But Lindsay is up next.
Hi.
Lindsay Barbee. Hey, how are you? Can you share your story and which leadership principle really rang true for you?
Absolutely. Definitely courage. But I also want to add another. So courage and ownership. But I think courage is important because it applies to the others. You have to have the courage to change your perspective and see the world from a place of abundance rather than lack. You have to have the courage to be your authentic self, or to pursue the goals that you really want, and to live the life that you want. But for it also applies to ownership, because when you are the many labels that women are, a mother, a wife, a manager, you have responsibilities to others. However, I think that when women operate from a perspective of ownership and they're in the driver's seat, then they can still help, support, do the things they can for other, but they are putting themselves first. And I think that that is really hard to do sometimes. So courage and ownership are the ones that are most impactful to me. I joined Tide Risers in 2018 in New York, and have gone on to continue to participate in various activities with the group. What I think is interesting is Tide Risers continues to evolve, and the cohort, or the women of Tide Risers, also continue to evolve, but they can continue to operate as they evolve. And I have the tendency to wait until everything is finished to then start, or to then continue on the journey. Whereas one thing that I really find interesting with Tide Risers is really the courage to kind of perform when you're not yet finished, or perform if you're not yet the expert. And I think that builds a lot of vulnerability, a lot of closeness, a lot of trust. But it also, it connects to ownership as well, because it's saying that there is no right answer. This is what I'm doing, and this is what I think is right today. And when I learn more, I'll evolve. And I think that a lot of people, but specifically women, and will often hold themselves back until they feel like they're ready. And so the concept of being an owner, being in the driver's seat, and then also having the courage is like, you're ready now to do whatever the thing is. And if it's not perfect, then you'll get better when you start doing it. So I definitely have learned that from my Tide Risers experience, but I'm still trying to internalize that in my mind, which is why it's helpful that it's a continuous community, because you keep coming back to the same messages.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Lindsay. I really appreciate that you called out that there's this sort of constant evolution, because that is one of our practices. I mean, I never want to get to a place with this organization where we're like, all right, we've done it. We've created the model. It's done. It's perfect. And there's some days when I kind of wish that we did do that, because I think it'd be easier. But you know, the world is changing around us so fast. I mean, last year we made this tremendous shift from our in-person meetings that we used to do, kind of location specific, to moving everything online and learning how to do that well. And we just can't really ever expect to stay in place. And I don't think we can wait until everything's perfect and done to launch it, because we just never get anywhere. So I really appreciate you sharing that and framing it as courage. I think it is courageous. Okay, so what we want to do now is send everyone out into breakout rooms. We're going to have 5 breakout rooms. Lindsay's going to be at 4 breakout rooms. Sorry. Thank you, Erin. Lindsay's going to be in 1 breakout room. Join Lindsay to talk more about her experience. You know, what I didn't do is ask each of these amazing women to talk a little bit about their personal and professional backgrounds, but you can learn more about that when you go visit with them. I would say make a decision based on, like, if there's somebody you want to get to know more, or if there is one of our leadership principles that you would like to delve into more, or if there's an aspect of community building that came up in one of these, in something that someone said today, go visit them in that room. So Lindsay will have 1 room, Maëlle will have 1 room, Ayanna will have 1 room. I'm going to have a room as well. So if you would like to learn, come with me if you'd like to learn more about the Tide Risers experience. We could talk a little bit about this later, but applications are closing next week for our upcoming cohort. So if you have any sort of like more questions about the program, you can join my room. So Erin is going to do the amazing job of getting everybody organized into their breakout rooms. Do you want to launch them now, Erin?
They should be open. So if you kind of like click on breakout rooms at the bottom, you should see the room that you want to go into, I think.
I don't have a breakout room at the bottom.
Yeah, you got to go down to the bottom.
Does everybody see that?
Click on breakout room, and then it should show you the different rooms with the names of the different presenters, and you just join the room you would like to go to.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to give everybody about, let's see, should we do 15 minutes, Katie?
That sounds great.
Okay, super. All right, we'll see you all back here soon.
To the other side, Erin.
Oh no, tell us, what was it?
It was not at all. I just wanted to Erin.
It's always so awkward, that sort of just being zipped back out of your breakout room. So sorry to everybody in my breakout room. I was kind of like mid-sentence, but I'm happy to pick up that conversation again, because it was a very good question, Olympia, that you brought up. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you all had some good conversations and had the opportunity to talk with some interesting new women and maybe see some familiar faces. So we have just about 8 more minutes left. I'd love to just hear if anybody has any kind of thoughts, or if there have been any aha moments about what we've been talking about today, just in terms of community, our leadership principles, which are our values that really underpin our community. If anybody has anything they'd like to share about their experience, I'd like to open up the floor for the next couple of minutes. And if you want to talk, you'll just need to unmute yourself. As always, I'm never afraid to call on people, so.
Me neither. Lara, we can tag team people.
Awesome. I think I'm going to call on Aparna. Aparna, are you with us? Oh, there you are. Hey. Aparna, do you have anything that you'd be interested in sharing about your Tide Risers experience or community, or even just like conversations that you've heard tonight that might have sparked something?
I think I want to talk a little bit about abundance because that was not brought up at all. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And I feel that's something really important because it leans really deeply into our community, and how like we're big on community over competition, because I feel like the women in Tide Risers really give openly to each other and just share abundantly. And I just feel like every time I've ever asked for anything, I've always received, and I've also given back. And I just feel that our Slack has been such a nice network there to share information and receive information. And it's such a nice way for us to just communicate with each other and keep in touch between sessions. And like, hey, I read a book and this is nice information. And it's been such a good learning experience throughout last year. I think I've read more nonfiction last year than in so many years. And it's just something that came up even in our breakout room, where we talked about like, have you been reading like other books and stuff? And yes, we do talk a lot about other things, or like, oh, you know what, like what are small rituals you do and things like that. But I feel like we talk about things that spark joy for us, and like things that fill our bucket and things like that. So it's not just about what's in our sessions, but we're all talking about things that we're doing in our personal life and things like that. So we're growing friendships, and so it's something that we do in Tide Risers. So we're building relationships with each other. And I think when I joined last year and it was supposed to be just in person, when we moved to online, I was initially sad. But I feel like, Lara, I would never have gotten to know you if it hadn't moved to online as well as I do now. So I feel like somehow pivoting to this online network has been a blessing in disguise, because I have met so many people and gotten to know people like Maëlle, and it's been a way to like increase our bandwidth to get to know a wider community. So I'm really excited for this year, because I feel like it's a way of thinking of abundance in a different way, where it's like spreading our wings and just having a nicer, bigger community of women that we can get to know. Because in a global way of thinking of it, like we can just have a bigger network of women that we can lean into. And that's all I want to say.
Yeah, thank you, Aparna. Maëlle, did you raise your hand?
I did.
Go for it, Maëlle.
So something that came up in our group that I wanted to share is that there is no one thing to get out of Tide Risers. So we were talking about, there are people who want to transition into the workforce again and don't know how to go about doing that. Or it may be that you have this entrepreneurial venture and you want more support to grow it and build it. Like, there is no one goal. It's really about understanding what is it that you want more of in your life, and using Tide Risers to help you get there. So it could be professional, it could be personal, it could be both. But I would just say there's no one kind of goal or topic. It's really about what you bring to it. And then it's leaning into the ownership principle and the abundance principle and all these principles to say, how do I tap into that through Tide Risers? And so to allay any concerns, it doesn't mean that like you have to be the CEO and you're growing into your next venture. Like, wherever you are, there is no judgment around where you are. It's all from a place of abundance and support to help this network that you can leverage to then bring more into your life. That's all.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Maëlle, because that is a very good point. We were talking about community building and our leadership principles today. What we didn't talk about today is our actual curriculum and kind of the experience of moving through Tide Risers. And if you'd like to learn more about that, We are, first of all, you can go to our website and read more about it. We are tiderisers.com, but Katie Singh and I are also hosting another session next week on March 3rd at noon Eastern time, 5 p.m. London time. And we'll talk more about the nuts and bolts of the program, but also sort of the application and if you have any last minute questions, because the applications are due on March 5th. That's a week from tomorrow. But yeah, our curriculum is designed to really support the needs of women in like all the very many places we might be in our lives. And in my room, we were talking a lot about transition. A lot of women come to us when they are in a place where they are experiencing transition or thinking they may need to. And this is a particularly powerful time to sort of do the really deep introspective work to understand who we are, how we show up in this world, what our strengths are, how to amplify those strengths, and then how to build upon our community to meet our intentions and goals. So really appreciate you all being here with us today. I do also want to mention financial assistance is available. If you have any need, we never want women to not join our community because of financial consideration. So please get in touch with myself or Katie Singh if you would like to discuss financial assistance. It's there, so please do reach out to us about that. And yeah, we hope to see you again soon. And thank you very much to everybody for being with us here today. Take care, everyone. I'll hang out online for a little bit longer if anybody has any last minute questions. But for the rest of you, thanks for being with us.
Everyone.
Big thanks to Maëlle, Lindsay, and Ayanna as well for sharing your stories.
Yes, thank you all so much for sharing your stories.